and collectively and independently, we each have a job to sort of, authentically as possible, map that progress and that process within the kind of hive mentality and see, how it affects mainstream consciousness, but also our own as well, to see our own failures and triumphs and how that is affected by this shift. So those who exist as human beings, as three-dimensional entities at the time of the shift, are in a unique position to learn and teach, and that goes for everybody, however articulate or however little or much you wish to share that. It doesn't matter how you broadcast your information. It's what you have in your own mind, your own intimate thoughts in bed at night or in the garden or driving the car. Those are the thoughts that map this creation. Everybody has a sort of part to play in that.
Thanks, Neil. I do agree. Obviously, in this 3D world that we live in, it's a closed-loop system, so there's obviously going to be feedback. Our consciousness affects, say, the sun, and energies affect us. Now, the interesting point, though, was you've obviously been around for a while, and you've seen society grow and change. With this shift or change, do you think, realistically, if you look at people that are still watching American Idol, not to pick on that show, but things like that, watching football, do you think a lot of people will be up to the challenge to change, or will they be so enamored in and just be shocked by the whole thing?
I think it is very distinctly a choice that one makes, and sometimes observing somebody's actions, if they sat in the sofa in this slumber watching American Idol and Simon Cowell and Paris Hilton and goodness knows what, if they sat in that slumber and you look at them and you just kind of despairingly and think, well, you're not going anywhere, buddy, what you're doing just sucks, basically, and there's very little chance of you doing anything else, because anybody who is on a path of their own spiritual unfoldment will recognize in themselves and acknowledge that it is quite a lengthy piece of work in a way. You can't just flip into it. It's not like some Satori Zen state that you just switch into and that's it, you've got it. It's hard work and it takes a long time. And I would say it's probably a 10-year process to get to the starting line. And then it's a 10-year process after that to get to a relatively sane and balanced point of self-initiation. So you're talking, really, I would say, looking at people and peers of mine and friends of mine, some older, some younger, probably a 20-year process to approach a point of basic understanding, kind of like in karate. When you get your black belt, before that point, you think it's all leading up to this point of mastery when you get your first downgrade. And when you do get it, this realization dawns on you that you didn't know anything before, and now you're just starting, you're just at the very start with a certain set of techniques and moves and abilities that set you up for the future grading that you're going to put yourself through. So that self-initiation is a shock to most people, and they perceive it as this extraordinary sort of uphill struggle. And if you are operating in the mainstream, when you contemplate that struggle, it just is overwhelming. So the easy thing to do is just throw yourself into this amazing sort of 21st century smorgasbord, sensual, pornography of every kind, positive, negative, light, dark, constructive, destructive. There's so many things you could just blow your whole life on. It's very easy to do. And anyone who's ever sort of gone into a fabulous library or played amazing video games or is a film buff or is into, painting or gardening, some of those things are wonderful and some of them are stupid, but the ability to get lost in the matrix of the construct is profound. And I think what is missing are credible paths forward for people who do have an inclination to do something and do have an inclination to change. And that's what's missing, because in previous times, particularly in Western Europe, there were these schools, these spiritual schools that weren't considered religious as we understand it now. They didn't have those kind of hierarchical salvation doctrines. They were schools of personal enlightenment, and they were schools of kind of holistic ecological soundness So there was an understanding that spirit and mind and nature interpenetrate each other, and they were very well regarded. And 2,000 years ago, those systems were really crushed by the Roman Empire in my understanding, this is esoteric for some, but as really just a reflection of the Egyptian dynasties. It's the same force, as Philip K. Dick said, the empire never ended. It's one empire that just changes its robes. But what that means is, although that's a study in itself and a book and an interview in itself, of course, it means that we've lost that connection where we can't kind of get out of bed in the morning and think, right, I need to work on my spiritual path. I'm going to go and see my community teacher, who is somebody who is tuned into our community, who knows the land, who knows the people, who understands the specific challenges and adventures of this particular piece of land and this particular frequency range that we live in, whether you're in France or Germany or Bulgaria or America or whatever. Every place has a specific frequency and specific cultural challenges with that. And it's very difficult to do that on the internet. So there's a lot of information around now, sure, more than there used to be. But it's a very linear and impersonal acquisition process. It's only really where you do bring it into fellow experience, where the rubber meets the road, the attainment is brought upon oneself. And that's completely absent from the mainstream narrative. That conversation, that observance is not present in the mainstream. You will not find it anywhere, in any university, on any television station, anywhere. So people, quite frankly, don't know where to begin, and that's a con that the control system exploits, because it is a human frailty, and everybody listening to this and everyone participating in that, you know yourself that when we hesitate and vacillate about something because we don't know how to do it, the tendency is to just drop it and do something else instead. And everybody does that all the time. But when you're doing that chronically with regard to your own unfoldment, and that's a serious issue, and that's why we see this extreme deterioration as we shift. It doesn't always have to be like this, but because there's been this disavowal of the inner work for so long, the outside world is a direct representation of that spiritual poverty, basically. And the crudeness and vulgarity of it is very disturbing for people. So, quite frankly, they're not sure what to do. They'll sedate themselves. And that's a choice. And it doesn't excuse you from making an incorrect choice, but that's an explanation of why that choice is made. Personally, I think there's no getting away from the ultimate choice of becoming an authentic, spiritual, ascendant human being, which is normal and natural. If you deny that, you're ultimately going to kind of snakes and ladders style go back to square one and have to repeat the journey until you do get it. I don't think there's any escaping this, but that only makes sense within the context of many lifetimes of a soul journey that traverses many identities and so on. Within a single lifetime, that doesn't kind of make much sense. But if you zoom out and if you use some of the old techniques to look at that, to get your consciousness outside of your body completely, you can soon understand and appreciate that the journey is a long one, a few thousand years, essentially. And over that time, there are many opportunities to accept that divine path, because that is the only path, essentially. So you can take a very, sort of Mahayana Buddhist view of this and say, well, let's not get our knickers in a twist because everybody gets there in the end, essentially. So if you look at someone who's struggling, just, love them from a distance, smile and move on, because they will get there eventually. And that takes the pressure off the impulse to try and wake people up and share your journey and what books worked for you and what teachers work for you. There's no point in doing that, really, because until that key choice is made as a serious philosophical shift that every man, woman and child is able to make, in my view, then they're just playing on the edges of it, really. It's just what I call spiritual Las Vegas. It's just an amusement park. It's just a game, and they're not really bothered, and they'll read, a Eckhart Tolle book, which is great, by the way, and they'll, buy Rhonda Byrne's The Secret, again, which is positive for some people. Very popular books, very easy to digest, and they'll think, yeah, there's something in that. That's interesting, and then just put it down and go back to the television. And that's not appropriate, and that's not adequate. So what shifts somebody from that kind of playing on the edges of the path with actually walking on it is that primary decision in oneself to say, this is something that, although subtle, and although is not defined very well in the mainstream, is something, this spark, this flame, this light that's in everybody. And we all know deep down, and obviously, again, the people in this community that you speak to know it quite well. But even those who don't, I feel that they all know that there's a path to walk. And the depression and the despondency that characterizes the 20th and 21st centuries is a result of continually ignoring that. And again, the positive spin on that, just a silver lining to that cloud, is that it's never too late to make that decision. And in the end, you have to make it. So you might as well grasp it, like right now, while there's this shift in place. And I think again, we're going to perhaps come to this as some of the points we discuss we may cover. But the universe, if you like, the solar system, our galactic community here, there is a kind of fail-safe threshold where it says, right, you've got 6,000 or 12,000 or 24,000 years to get there, and if you don't, I'm going to reset the whole system. And that's what the universal model is designed to do. It's an engine that continually increments with or without us. So we articulate it, but it has its own momentum as well. So the difference now is that people are going to be forced to accept this, particularly with earth changes that are on the way very imminently. People are going to be excluded from the comfort of being able to ponder this at the weekend or when they've retired or when there's a nice time to do it. You're going to have to do it right now, right today, right in this minute. And that, again, from a transpersonal point of view, is a very, very good thing. From a point of view, self and identity, it's a very scary thing. And those two things coexist at the same time. And everybody is subject to a little of both. But it's certainly a very, very interesting dynamic, and it will be curious to see how that plays out in the social consciousness, which will not be televised and which will not be felt in any other way than going out and experiencing that for yourself. It cannot be measured or mapped on a screen, so that CNN and BBC won't be able to tell us what that goes like. We have to find out for ourselves.
Thank you, Neil. And this time, hopefully, we pass the test. I'll pass it over to Gemini.
Thank you. Hello, Neil. It's such a pleasure to have you join us this evening. How are you?
Hi, I'm very good. Thank you. Thanks for having me here.
Sure. You have stated your mantra of letting sleeping people, babies, sleep to awake on their own. Do you suppose that the sleep is actually the machine's defensive mechanism in support of the machine's programming? Further, with the increase of spiritual awakening, are we now at a point of critical mass that those who are lightly sleeping have enough courage to feel okay to awaken?
Yeah, that's connected to the previous point somewhat. So we've kind of gone into that, I guess. But yeah, it's a very important point, particularly for those who are at the beginning of their awakening or ascendant process. And when I say awakening and ascendance, those words are sort of a bit loaded for the more metaphysically minded, and it might turn some people off. So